Hello and welcome to Bringing Education Home. I'm Herb.
And I'm Christina. And together we bring you experts and ideas to help grow healthy, happy, successful families that are both inside.
And outside the box. If you like the show, be sure to follow Christina on Facebook.
And please leave us a like review on your favorite podcast platform.
I once again have the pleasure of introducing Howard Freedman. Howard has spent nearly 25 years helping students and families navigate the complex world of college financial aid so they can avoid paying the full cost of college. Drawing on a background in business management, consulting, and education, he has worked with thousands of families across the United States and Canada to make college more affordable and less overwhelming. Howard is also the author of Making College Happen, a speaker and a longtime advocate for expanding access to financial aid and scholarships, including his work with Boston Public Schools Access Program. When he's not helping families plan for college, he enjoys biking, reading, gardening, and bringing a little humor to the process. Welcome, Howard. It is a pleasure to have you here again. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I hope this podcast is informative, maybe a little bit funny at times, and realistic. And my goal is to share information, my wisdom to help other people, so they in turn can make the best and the most out of their college journey.
And thank you for having that goal, because that's exactly what Bringing Education Home is all about, helping families make those great choices around education, around family life, to make sure that they're getting the best they can for themselves and for their kids. And for those who are curious about why we're saying welcome back, we had the pleasure of interviewing Howard about a year ago. So if you look back at season 2, episode 23, you will see his first interview. And we wanted him back because, of course, the landscape has changed. And in just a year, it's amazing what changes in the world, in finances, in colleges, etc., and even how families look at the importance of college or no college, depending on what their child might need. So, Howard, thank you again for coming back, and we appreciate you being here.
My pleasure.
Yeah. So just really quick, help us understand that backstory just a little bit. People can go back to episode 23 and get more of it, but remind us, why is this so important to you, this college financial funding?
Well, I think we're talking about grooming um, the new generation of students to help guide them in the right direction, which in fact really has changed. Some of it's been the same. Some of it's been impacted by AI. Some of it's been impacted by the economy. Um, and I think it's really a good time to take a fresh look at what the opportunities are, and also take a fresh look at realistically what parents and families can do to support it. Along that road, I think it's important to establish very, very strong communication between the parent, and sometimes they call it contributor now, as to what they can really do. It's better, in my opinion, uh, when a student and a family know how much they can afford, or how to go about getting what they can afford, than rather getting an acceptance letter and say, Mom, Dad, I got into XYZ university, da 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 da, I'm so happy. Well, that's great, but we didn't talk about how we're going to pay for it. And maybe they didn't give you as much as we expected. But Mom, Dad, that's where I really want to go. I know, son or daughter, but we just can't do it. We got this and that going on, but we want you to get the best education for what we can do and what can we afford. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. That's what it's about.
I love that, because that is one of the things that we really, really stress with every single show, is that communication issue piece, right? Like, we need to talk about things. We need to lay things out. We need to help make sure our kids understand in ways that they can understand and will understand. And then also that pre-planning, making sure things are started before the last minute.
Right. Excellent.
You know, I feel for a lot of these people, and exactly what you're saying. I actually kind of like jokingly in my head thought of a business a long time ago
Mhm.
where I get kids to marry each other
Hmm.
And then because you get married, that's the only way that they don't include your parents' finances in your
Uh,
financial aid. So
sure.
marry freshmen, kind of have them stay together, maybe not actually be married, and then at the end of
Hmm.
college get it annulled. Um,
Hmm.
just to not have to pay for college.
At the full price.
Right.
But there's all sorts of problems with that. Probably not necessarily the best way to go about it, but still it's
Yeah.
a fun thing to think about. How what are some better legal ways? Because
Legal
I'm not even
ways.
sure necessarily that would be legal.
Right.
But what are some better ways to help parents when they get to that to actually be able to afford it?
Okay. I think the first thing, and we have to kind of go back because it's hard to envision when a child is younger to think about college. It really is. And I think the first thing is to start this process early. Now, it's kind of like I'm looking for a good analogy, taking a piece of clay, okay, and you're a sculptor, and you have this big pillar of clay, and it's your job to mold it into something beautiful and something that people really be proud of. Well, it's the same thing dealing with a child. Um, it's your job because children need to develop their maturity and get direction to how are we going to mold not my child, not a piece of clay, to get them marketable. Now, I'm not saying that in any way to be, a moneymaker. I'm saying that if a student is prepared, they have the skills and the education, and they become marketable, then their value will increase significantly. So I think the whole process of rather than waiting to the senior year is something you have to kind of look at to say, well, what kind of school do I want to go to? What kind of support do I need? What do I need to do to earn merit aid? What are the types of things I can do to be a leader? What are the types of things that, I can do to make a difference in the world? But it's also time to say, Mom, Dad, I don't want to go to college. I just really didn't want to tell you that. But I didn't want to go because I'm trying to please you, but I'm not pleasing myself. And that's really when you get into the communication. I think it's a matter of more than money. Look, the more money you have, the better, let's face it. Uh, there are people, I deal with a lot of different people, some people who are quite wealthy, some people who are not, and some people mostly in the middle. And I really think you have to, as the teacher used to say to me a long time ago, okay, boys and girls, you have to put on your thinking caps. So I wish they gave out more thinking caps in school. Okay, think of an idea, but I think in terms of affordability, if that's really where we're going with this question, um, I think there's significant due diligence that should be done early, maybe in their freshman year of high school, to really know what you're getting into, to know what college is like, to know what career opportunities there are, to know, in fact, um, what's the latest thing. Certainly with AI, the curriculums are going to change. And what's happening in terms of investing in college is there should be over time people are thinkers and can take all this data and work it and be creative. And so it's a matter of being creative, but it's also when we get to money, let's talk about some things if that's what you'd like me to talk about. I think there's some very, very simple things that people don't think about, like, how can we cut expenses? they never really think about, oh, we got 3 cell phones, we got a cable service, we got, my child has this really nice car, I pay a lot of insurance on. Do I do I really need it? I think they should look at the fact that, yeah, there's online learning, there's part-time learning, there's community colleges, there's the military, there's employers that will give you money, and or employers that will take high school graduates and try to mold them into something because they're looking for core competencies. That's what they're looking for. They're not going to hire anybody necessarily who took Ancient History 202. There's no, it's it's nice, but I don't think there's really a great demand for Ancient History 202, analysis. But there is a demand for people who can think and invent and be creative and bring in new and fresh ideas because we're ready for that. And to do
Talking
that,
about helping other ideas is like I knew this guy who had a full-time job and he went and got a part-time job at Walmart just because they were going to pay for him to go to college.
sure.
So full-time job that he paid all his bills with, part-time job
Yeah.
just so that he didn't have to use his full-time job to pay for college. And yeah, he went to it saved him a lot of money. It was a little more work, but what
Yeah.
it gave him was a tremendous benefit.
Yeah, he
And
didn't.
parents, I've seen many parents, and we talk about emotions,
Mhm.
that feel compelled to send their child to college because their friends are going to college.
It's
And
propaganda. It's in
yeah,
every, it's like, oh, your kids are going to college, right? It's like
yeah.
it's expected now.
And who's paying the bill? I think there's a lot more said now about grandparents too. Because grandparents can provide money and funding for their grandchild without it impacting the FAFSA form. So, those are things where gets into financial planning, wills, trusts, and everything, with a money flow to the child to help them go to college. So it's a big, big area. And if you kind of put on that thinking cap again, you can think of all kinds of things, but everybody can go to college. There's over 5,000 colleges and universities in the US. There's about 75% of the students get some type of financial aid. It may not be big, but they'll get something. So it's possible, but never ever say no. In my book, I was kind of putting on my thinking cap and thinking of acronyms, and and I came up with two simple ones: yes and no. So I said, what can I make out of yes? So what I made out of it is you expect success. Is yes, that's my acronym. And then no means new opportunities. So for example, if a student wanted to go to a particular college and they got rejected, maybe it's a new opportunity to go to plumbing school or go part-time and all that. So you can't just give up. Never ever give up. There's always something there for you.
Absolutely. And part of this whole process is that whenever kids are looking at colleges and parents are looking at colleges and things like that, and when you actually get into the nitty gritty, when they get that junior, senior year, the college application process has become like a little bit of a pressure cooker. It's like, oh, do you have this lined up, this lined up, this lined up? How can we kind of regulate those emotions, those feelings that we have as we're going through that between parent and student, and getting through that process a little bit easier?
I think, well, part of it is, as I said, start early. Um, you look at stress. That's a big overused word. It doesn't have to be stressful. It really doesn't. Matter of fact, it can be fun. It could be fun. And, it can be fun. It really can be fun.
For those people who are just listening, Herb's shaking his head no, and Howard's like, no, really, it can be fun.
Yeah, so I was really smart. So but I was also really dumb. So the way I picked my colleges is I got a whole bunch of applications to schools I liked, and then I procrastinated until there was only two left that still had dates where I could apply. And then the last week is like, oh shoot, I better get this one in. I've got 2 days, and that's the college I went to.
That's, I mean, that's the way, that's the way it was.
That was also a while ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a while ago. But I think I think part of it is the planning. I think that's really a big part of it. And I don't think neither the parent nor the student should be pressured. I wrote an article about emotions and stress. And if you think of all the emotions, the stress usually occurs when somebody just doesn't know what they're supposed to know and is kind of surprised by it. I didn't know that college was $70,000. Boy, am I stressed. Well, why don't you know that 4 years ago? I think guilt comes in. I think there's a fact that if a parent hadn't saved enough money, maybe they feel guilty that they can't send their child to the best schools possible. I think a dangerous emotion is indifference, that a parent just doesn't care. They say, well, I came from a poor family and nobody in my family went to college and nobody helped me. I worked 3 jobs, nobody helped me. So I'm not going to help you. And, so it kind of gives the student kind of a negative vibe in terms of, I'm going to have to do this, on my own. I think, joy can come in too, but it comes in no matter what we talk about when you set a goal. You have to set a goal because you just can't let things happen. It's a mistake to say, well, gee, my guidance counselor said, XYZ college is really good, would be good for you. There's a lot of kids that go there. So I think at some point, parents and children have to kind of let go, and children need to learn how to, essentially network, talk to other kids, talk to graduates, um, talk to professional people in the field, what's involved, because a lot of schools now involve more than 4 years. It's a bachelor's degree isn't as relevant maybe as a master's degree or a doctor's degree. So I think this conversation is not, hey, let's sit down in the living room, we'll order some pizzas and everything we'll talk about. It's ongoing. And I think along with it,
I think having a plan is incredibly, incredibly important, and to discuss it with other people, because
yeah,
there are a lot of people with college graduate and MBAs who are serving coffee because they didn't plan and their degrees don't mean anything. So they're
no,
thousands of dollars in debt and they can't get a decent job.
I look at it backwards kind of. I agree with you, Herb,
The
that
planning.
I think you go backwards. You go from the school and say, well, when I graduate from the school, what are the opportunities? How much do they pay? Um, a good example I always use is, let's say a student wants to become a social worker. That's what they want to do. They want to become a social worker. And social workers aren't paid that much. But they also want to go to a very expensive college. Why? Because their boyfriend or girlfriend goes there. Or they have a great golf course. Or, it's a lot of fun to go to that college. That's a bad reason. But if the college, let's say, taught nuclear engineering and everybody that got out were highly sought after. The starting salary was 150. Hey, spend the money, it's worth it because somewhere along the way the student will have their responsibility to pay for it. It doesn't mean going to college that a parent has to pay for everything. It doesn't. But again, the student that wants to become a social worker. They can go to state school, they can go to community college. Why not? It's not going to make any difference as you get older. And I can say this, that when I was younger and I was started off in the workforce, I had my diploma tacked up on the wall in my office. And I think what I was trying to do is impress people that I had a college degree, but nobody really cared. Because the requirement to get into the job is you needed a degree. What really mattered most is my contribution to the company and to the organization without regard to my degree. So you can get somebody that went to a small college that's brilliant, and you could get somebody, and I'll mention it, nothing against Harvard, but I visited Harvard, and there's brilliant, really very intelligent kids, and they didn't know which button to press across the street. And then, again, don't come after me, Harvard. I didn't mean I use you as an example, but it's a question between learning and becoming educated. You can learn a lot of things, you really can, but how educated are you to put them into play and um, become useful? So
It's
again,
one of
there's
those
less.
things that we talk about a lot is that word education, right? A lot of people believe education is academics,
Mm,
learning certain things at certain times. But when
mm,
we speak education, we talk about the whole child, the
right,
whole family. So you
right,
have to have those life skills as well
right.
as the knowledge to help you put into place. But education is so much more than just book learning.
Oh, sure, it is. And I was reading a book about Steve Jobs,
Uh-huh.
and some other books, and he was not a good student. It wasn't that he wasn't intelligent, he was very intelligent, but he couldn't find anything that interested him. Okay. So the college at that time let him take what courses he wanted. But he was like a genius. He learned a lot. He had the life skills. He didn't have good management skills, but he had life skills to create this company that was worth a lot of money. And there's a lot of people that just had it in them to succeed. They wanted to be successful. And, again, I think back to college, I did okay, but there's a lot of things I have to memorize. There's memorization. And that's
I worked
not
at a small
education.
sorry. I worked at a small electronics firm named Intel for
Uh,
about 15 years.
uh,
And there were some engineers, PhDs, I mean, smart people.
mm,
And I was based where I worked, I was basically a glorified help desk guy. And I would go up to these PhD office working on these incredible stuff and have to teach them how to turn the computer on
mm,
because they couldn't figure out how to turn the computer on when it got turned off. My
mm.
computer's not working, and they didn't
Yeah.
have the computer on. So yeah, the that kind of PhD, all of that doesn't necessarily mean that that's how you get along in life. Because I also, not
Mhm.
one of her brothers is not necessarily book smart, didn't do well in school. He works driving truck at a lumber yard, and he's one of the main people at the place. They rely on him because he is so
Mhm.
competent and good at all the life skills. So, and if you really do want your children to go to college, this is
Mhm.
send them to homeschool because colleges
Yeah.
right now are heavily, heavily recruiting
Recruiting.
from homeschool kids because they
Yeah.
are much more likely to graduate because they don't get there and not know how to
They
cross the
have the life
street.
skills.
So it's like these
Right.
kids at Harvard, they can't figure out how to push
Yeah, they
forward on
can't.
a crosswalk. Yeah, you get a homeschool kid at Harvard, they're not going to have those kind of problems.
No, and I think as I look back, and I was telling my wife that maybe I wish I did something else. When I look around, because there's certain things I said, gee, I can't do this and I can't do that. I just can't do it. But maybe I should have tried. I mean, I'm thinking now about doing comedy acts because I never did them before, and I like to do them. And I think the most important thing, and then, whoever's listening is I had a good job. I had a lot of good jobs. But after I reached a certain point, and I was a consultant, and they brought me in to figure out all these problems, I was unhappy. I said, why are you so unhappy? You're really good at what you're doing. Because they said there's no more challenge anymore. I come in, they have a problem, I fix the problem, they give me good money, but every day I go to work, I'm kind of down in the dumps because it's just maintaining myself. It's not being really happy and feeling as valuable as I did when I was hired. So you have to tell yourself, what can I do when I wake up in the morning? I'm really happy to go to work. I'm really happy to do this. I'm really happy to create that. I'm really looking forward to going to work. And I think uh, it used to be I want a job because I want to make a lot of money. That's what I want. I want to make a lot of money, and because I'll be happy. I'll be happy if I make a lot of money. Live in a beautiful house, have a beautiful car. Um, have people see me and say, "Oh, this Howard, he must have really done well because he has a Bentley and a Rolls Royce. Wow. Well, look at his house. It has, 14 bathrooms, 16 bedrooms. Wow, he must have done really well." But you want to know something? Nobody cares because in here and up here, if you don't feel good, it's not going to make any difference.
If
So
you're
find
spending
something
40
that makes
hours
you
a week,
happy.
yeah, if you're spending 40 hours a week doing something
You
that's
don't like to
that's
do.
not good for you or that you
Yeah.
don't like, that affects your whole life. That's like 25% of your week not feeling good, to try and use the rest of your week to make up for that.
Yeah.
I've had lots of jobs come and go. I've loved some, I've hated some. The ones that I loved had nothing to do with either how much money I was making. It was the intrinsic value of the people I was working with, and the work that I was doing was so much more important than the
Yeah.
amount of money I was making. And when I compromised myself to keep that high dollar thing, that's when my life started falling apart.
There was a movie, it's an old movie, but a classic was called The Man in the Gray Flannel Suit. It was a movie starring Gregory Peck, who was a very impressive looking person. And he was essentially married to the company.
Mm-hmm.
Everything he did. Well, I can't go to the children's birthday because I have this project to do. Oh, I'm going to be home late because I got a lot of stuff on my desk. And what he was doing without realizing, he was creating a distance between himself and his family. And he was a devoted back then company man, company person. And then he got fired. He had nothing. He had absolute, because he didn't have a balance in his life. And I think what's important, especially with education, I think people need to have some balance, to have some hobbies, some interests, some creativity, some volunteer work, all that stuff, because education you'll always learn, it's to the day you die, you're always going to learn something new. But also, you can't be so rigid and addicted to working for a company, okay, that you have nothing else in your life. You're a boring, unwanted, unloved person because organizations don't have any feelings. They really don't have any feelings. If they need you, fine. So I think getting back to education, I think it's important to develop as many skills as you can and life skills, learning to write well, learning to speak well, go to Toastmasters. I used to go to Toastmasters and get in front of groups, learn social skills, learn the technical skills, learn AI, learn all that stuff. You don't have to know everything, but that's what you need to survive. You really do.
Learn how to fail and keep going.
Yeah.
Learn
Yeah,
how to
learn from
take
your
a hit and
failures.
stand up. Learn how when it gets rough, you do what you do. Like
Uh,
those things aren't taught anymore. And it's like that's
That's what the
how we
kids
grew
need.
up. It's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
and it's like that they don't have that nowadays is like hard to even comprehend.
Well, Thomas Edison, there was a book about him. He said, like you're so brilliant, and he kind of lived a life. He only slept 4 hours a night because he was always thinking. And they said, you know, you discovered all these things and discovered the light. He says, no, I didn't discover it. It was there. I was just the one that found the solution.
Ah,
So everything's there. Everything in the world we see that's created is there. It's up to you to find it. It's the same thing. That's where education comes in, and knowledge and worldly knowledge that you're not going to necessarily learn from a book, but learn by seeing and doing, associating, and
so Howard,
networking.
yeah, you've mentioned your book. So let's tell our audience the title of the book and some of the, like 2 or 3 key topics in there. And then also make sure you share your information about how they get a hold of you. How can they find out more about you helping them get the finances in line and find college that's good for them, etc.
I'd be honored to do so. This is my book, if you can see it. I don't know.
Hold it closer to your head. Usually it focuses about the same place as your head.
Yeah,
Not quite.
back a little bit more.
How
There
about
we
that?
go. Making college happen.
There it is. Got it.
Okay, the name of my book is called Making College Happen. Many of the topics we discussed today are in the book. And
You can put it down now.
essentially, and you can get the book on Amazon,
Okay.
Making College Happen. The main thing in the book, the way I wrote it, is to give families this roadmap of where to start and where to end,
Perfect.
ways to finances, the talk, getting into detail, asking questions about, well, son or daughter, why do you want to go to college? Why should I spend the money? And then, so the back and forth. It has ways of planning ahead with calendars. It's a very down to earth book. I do have some humor in it, and I'm very, very proud of it. You can reach me. My website is called financialaidconsulting.com. And in that website, it's not just an advertisement, it's a website that has podcasts, many of the articles I've written, many of the things that I do, how to help people. I have some newsletters. So it's really intended for families that just really don't know where to begin and need a starting point. It is not a book on how to fill out a FAFSA form or a profile. Um, I do want to say, as I say to everybody, my job, my purpose in life is to make a difference. I really feel that there's so much of a need out there for educated people to attack or analyze the problems that exist in the world and find some better solutions. With the advent of AI, it's not an enemy, it's a tool. Just as much as the calculator was a tool, the personal computer, things like that. It's a tool that gathers information or asks information. And then it's up to the person asking it to figure out what to do with it and how to find answers they could to make, the next generation a great generation. That's what we want. We want to hand the ball off to the younger generation and let them run with it and see what they can come up with. Because they'll come up with things that are a lot better than what we have today. And we're pretty lucky to have what we have.
So I was the first person in my family to go to college, and my parents were actually pretty poor, so their aid or their contribution to my financial aid was zero.
Mhm.
So I did it myself. And Well, they really did help a lot. I did not do it myself, but just their financial aid
Right.
to the school was zero. I couldn't have done it without them. Totally lost where I was going. But in reading your bio and some of the sample questions, you talked about how important it is to like tour the school,
Mhm.
and that again never even crossed my mind. I told you how I applied. I waited till the last one was accepting applications, and that's the one I went to. Um, so
I didn't tour my schools either.
didn't ask
Yeah.
questions, didn't even
Uh,
think about asking the college a question or
mm.
even have the concept of thinking about that. What kind of questions and what is the purpose of touring a school? Because the school works, otherwise nobody would go there. So for me, it's like, well, what does that have to do with anything? So that's kind of, I'm curious about this.
Well, let me tell you what I did when I was accepted to colleges. There was a college I got accepted to that was very well respected, but a lot of rich kids went there. And so I got on my old Ford Falcon that was all rusted, and I put on my polyester bell-bottom pants, and I decided to ride through the campus. And I looked, and I looked at the parking lot, and all the cars were new. They were just like, hey, this is really an expensive place. And then I went into the student union, and they had the trips for the weekend. They're going to New York and go to Paris and all that. And I went home and I told my mother, I said, I like the school, but I don't think we can afford it. My mother said, well, I'll help you. I said, no, Mom, I want to go to school that I feel like I'm like the rest of the kids. And I found another school and I did it. Now, today, uh, I talk a lot in the book about campus tours.
Mhm.
Um, Couple of things that are important. One, I think to put together, I call it a spreadsheet, whatever you want to call it, of the 10 most important questions that the parent would ask and 10 most important questions the student would ask, and then rank them. And it should be the same questions for every school you visit. Because how can you compare two schools if you have just different
Yeah,
questions?
different questions. Yeah.
And, they should be done independently. I think that one of the things that I kind of make fun of is that invariably, parents can't find the restrooms. So it's really important to find out where the restrooms are because that's usually something that everybody asks and they never talk about the restroom. So you should do that. I think it's important on a campus tour is to research the questions that could be answered before the tour. Like, how many students are here? That's a wasted question. You can get that. How many, what's the retention rate? Um, so all those questions are really wasted questions. But I think it's really important to ask questions that are not yes and no questions. More, could you tell me I'm interested in biology? About the majors, what kind of scholarships might be available, those things like that. I think parents are really concerned about campus safety. They're
Mhm.
concerned about the finances. They're concerned about ask questions about, scholarships, dorm rooms. I think what's really important, and most people forget this. And, I've written an article about horror stories, so I've talked about it. The fact that we talked about communication, but we need to talk about accountability. And I've seen a situation where I had a client and he took all his retirement money and he used it to pay for his child's education. But what happened, the student was a party animal and he liked to party more than study. And at the end of the year, he flunked out. And the parent lost their money. And the thing that's really important is once you say, I will help you, there should be accountability to say, I want to see your grades. I want to see how you're doing. Are you having problems with anything? Well, having problems with biology. Well, maybe we should look at getting you a tutor. You know, those things. You don't just pay the bill. You know, your interaction with the school isn't just I have the fall and the spring semester. I'll pay the bill, and then how'd you do at the end of the year? Well, I ended up with a 2.4. Well, you could have worked a little better, but the school was so nice. You know, we wanted to go into the city a couple of times, weekends. We just kind of, you know, that's not good enough. So I think on anything we do, whether it's in high school or college, there has to be some accountability to the parent to make sure that the student stays on track. It has to be.
Yeah. And just a heads up there, once your child is over 18, you can't just walk into the school and ask, even if you are paying the bill. So that's a conversation between you and your child, you and your student. You've got to make sure that they're sharing with you and being accountable because you can't get that from the school.
And that's a good point. I think when you have your discussion, well, let's talk about responsibilities. Okay, I'm going to be responsible for paying $20,000 towards your education, but as part of that deal, you need to keep me informed about um, your grades and everything. And if you stop doing it, I'm not paying. You know, you have to be as just blunt about it because this is not a game. This is serious, serious business. And when you look at what's happening when you visit a school, two things are happening. The one thing you're checking it out, you're going on a buying spree to see if this is really going to be for you. And then the school, if they really like you, go on a selling spree to try to sell it to you. And the student, the only way they can really understand if this is a right is what their gut tells them. They need to go to classes if they can. They need to mingle with the students. They have to go to the student union, maybe stay overnight, you know, attend classes, you know, see if the students are friendly or snobby, you know, that type of stuff. That's the only way you're going to know. You know, if you don't, you know, you don't want to go to school the first day and say, you know, this isn't really what I thought it was. So you got to do both the student and parent have to do their diligence. They have to.
Yep, exactly. Oh, wow. Cool. This has been a good conversation. Thank you, Howard, for it's really important that what we've talked about here today is not just academic, like you said, but it was also on the emotional side, what kind of emotions and how to communicate and things back and forth. So thank you for this journey into college finances and what to expect and what to talk about and communicate with your child. So thank you for being here today with us.
Yep. Thank you for being here. Again, it was a pleasure to talk with you again. And this is such an important topic, especially now, you know, we didn't even get into all of the changes and the stuff that's happening. Yeah. And so the college landscape is changing dramatically right now. Funding is changing, courses are changing. So it's like, if you're going to be sending your kids to college,
do your homework.
Pay attention, start asking questions, you know, read his book, do the tours, make sure that, you know, what you think you're getting into is really actually what's happening.
Yeah, so, well, thank you both for the opportunity. I wish I was a lot younger. I could be part of your program, but I think I'm done with college for the time being. But you're two very lovely people, and it's a real pleasure to work with you today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, audience, you know what time it is. It is time to like and review and subscribe and let other people know, because Howard gave us some absolute gems in this episode. And if you know a family who has a child who's getting ready to have that college conversation, say, hey, there's this cool podcast with this really cool guy who can give us some information about it. So make sure you're sharing around. Thank you so much for being with us and joining us every single week as we drop a brand new episode. Make sure you go to our website, vibrantfamilyeducation.com, and look at our current events. We have summits, we have master classes, we have courses, we have all those things, as well as this beautiful podcast that is helping families every single day. Thank you again for joining us today, Howard. And thank you, audience, for being here as well.
All right.
You're very,
Have a great day,
very
everybody.
welcome.
We will talk to you soon. right.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye for now.
Bye. Bye.
Hello and welcome to Bringing Education Home. I'm Herb.
And I'm Christina. And together we bring you experts